this is Marvin. I don't know, did anybody in here know Marvin from University IT? Marvin is the manager for the IT Operations Center in University IT, and what they do is that they handle all of the major incidents and outages and things in University IT. So when something happens, the network goes down, or Stanford Sites goes down, or phones go down, or Java goes down. That's what Marvin's team does. And they also manage, the service management around that. So they make sure that everything's up to date in the databases of who's responsible for different services, who the technical owner is, who the business operations owner is. And Marvin's a great guy. Nothing phases him. He's cool as a cucumber, even though he's in a really high stress job. We were in a meeting one time, and we were talking about who owns the service, what the escalation paths are for Stanford Sites, and who the business owner is, which is Sarah, my director, and who the technical operations owner is. And I said, I guess that's me. And he said, yeah, it's you. He said, you're responsible for the health of the service. I said, yeah, I suppose I am. I'm responsible for the health of the service. I thought about it. I'm responsible for the health of the service. I thought about it some more. I'm responsible for the health of the service. I'm responsible for the health of the service. And so I imagine that some of you are here today because you're also responsible for the health of a service, and it maybe fills you with a little bit of a sense of unease. For instance, how do we even define what the health of the service is? Does this look familiar to anyone? This screen? Anybody do Fitbit or health or track their steps or anything? So what we measure, the things that we measure can guide our choices and the choices that we make. So this is a screenshot from a Pacer app. And I don't know if any of you do this, track your steps, but if you do, I can imagine, if you're anything like me, you've seen a screen like this at somewhere around 10 o'clock in the evening and been like, I can walk around the kitchen a couple more times. I could get to 10,000 seriously before I go to bed. So the things that we measure, they can guide the choices that we make. So we want to make sure that we're measuring the correct things, and we want to figure out why and how we're measuring the correct things. So what I do is I map them to business objectives. So our team is about 17 people, and it consists of everything from site builders to developers to project managers to UX designers and user experience and front-end designers. So we were interviewing a project manager candidate a few months ago, and we got to the point of the interview where you say, candidate, do you have any questions for us? And the woman asked a really prescient question. She said, I would like to hear from each of you. How do you know that you're being successful? And it went around to everyone. And when it came to me, I said, you know what? I know when I'm being successful because I've got metrics that I track every month. And I track them month over month. And I look at them and I can tell whether I'm being successful because I have these metrics and I map them to business objectives. What we're trying to do as a service. It's not perfect. It's not fully refined yet, but that's essentially what I'm talking about today. So the business objectives that we map to, again, I said that I'm responsible for making sure that the service is secure, that it's stable, that it's performant, that it's scalable. Again, in addition, we want to make sure that we have a good reach. We're a central service at the university. We want to make sure that we reach as many people that are interested in and capable of using our service as possible. We want to make sure that it's accessible to users of all abilities in all ranges. And then we also want to make sure that our business continuity is good. And so this kind of ties in a little bit to stability and security, but it also ties into, there's a little bit more to it with business continuity. So if you've got a service interruption, you want to make sure that you can recover. In the case that you have a catastrophic data loss, you want to make sure that you can recover to a known recovery point. These are the business objectives that we try to achieve, and so these are the business objectives that I collect metrics on. Sean's seeing a picture, so I'll wait. So I collect various metrics on a monthly basis, first of every month, which I try to, what I'm learning is that the first of the month falls on weekends sometimes. So I try to do it on the first business day of every month. The metrics that I collect, I compare them with the past month's value, and I look at what the change was, and then I assess, have we improved, have we declined, how much, and I give them a rating. I also assess them against a target. I have a goal for each metric that essentially you say, we want this metric to be at N, and are we, close to meeting N, or are we 10% below, or are we 10% above, et cetera. So I do that every month. So as an example, this is a little screenshot from our uptime metrics from a recent month, and these are 3 different rows. We do have several different hosting environments, and so I track metrics on them. So you can see in the first one, we were 100% uptime this month. We were 100% uptime the last month. So better or worse, no change. It was the same, but that's good. Like if you're at 100%, that's fine. Like same's not really a problem. Our target's 3 nines, 99.9%, and so we're excellent. The overall rating. The second row, we actually improved a little bit from 99.98 to 100%. We improved, yay. Our target is 99.9, we're still excellent. Our third row, we declined from 100% to 99.99, which is a decrease. It's worse, but I don't want to red flag this. It's mildly worse. So it's still above our target. So the rating is still excellent. So you look at the comparison from month over month, but you also look at where you are in terms of the target of your goal. So what metrics do we collect? In terms of security, so I'm going to go through these in terms of the business objectives that we track against. So in terms of security, we look at how many Drupal security updates came out. This is something that we don't have any control over, but it is something that we try to track because we are heavily invested in Drupal as an open source software platform. And knowing how many security updates is an interesting metric to collect. Now we could go into probably a day-long conversation about whether or not the number of security vulnerabilities that are announced means that Drupal is secure or insecure or somewhere in between. I've had interesting conversations with my colleagues in university IT and information security about that. But the thing that we really try to track is when there are Drupal security updates that come out, how long does it take us to mitigate or patch them? And as we've been tracking these over the years, we make sure that our information security office requires us to patch or mitigate any critical or higher security vulnerabilities within 7 days or fewer. And over the past 18 to 24 months, we've been able to patch or mitigate every single critical or higher Drupal or Drupal core or contrib security vulnerability within 8 hours or fewer. The most recent one, we were able to mitigate it within 3.5 hours. So this is something that's an awesome metric to track, to be able to report up to my senior leadership and to be able to report to senior leadership throughout the university, so that when people say, oh, Drupal's really insecure, there are always these vulnerabilities that are being announced. And I'm like, it's an open source software package that actively tracks and seeks these vulnerabilities, and we're able to patch them like that. So this is a great thing to be able to track. We also do SSL Labs reports. I don't know if anyone's familiar with this, but it tracks the quality of your SSL certificates and your SSL communication. Of course, I put this one up here because it's an A+. So it grades you anywhere from, I've actually never seen one below an A. I put this one up here, and I threw this up here because I want to talk about the concept of cost versus benefit and effort required to improve, and whether or not that's worth it. So like I said, we have a number of hosting platforms. Not all of them are getting A+ on SSL Labs. Most of them are getting A's, and our target is A, and A+ is just a bonus. We got an A+ on this one website, this one environment, because we installed the Drupal Security Kit module and enabled HSTS transport security, so that it bumped us up to an A+. But we're at A's across the board, and how much effort would it take? We've got a ticket in the backlog to bump us up to A+, but do we really want to spend that much effort to get from A to A+ when we're at A's across the board, and we've got a few more areas where we've got some more growth to do? So this is in terms of the larger scope of looking at your metrics, where you are, your target, your improvement from month over month. Do you really want to spend the effort to get from an A to an A+ in one area versus maybe getting from someplace where you're underperforming to a more acceptable level. In terms of stability, we check uptime with status cake. This is a dashboard of status cake, which I realized when I was going through this is almost completely unreadable. So I did another screenshot, which is, this is from just one particular website for the Title IX website. Like I said, we try to achieve 99.9% uptime. Status cake checks every 5 minutes. So I'm not really certain that we can get to that we have the amount of information to really be certain that we can refine this to 5 significant figures or whatever. Aaron? What's the name of that service? Status cake. Status cake. Yeah, status cake. Funny name. We used to use Pingdom, and Pingdom got really expensive, and they completely changed their model and forced us to reconfigure everything. And so I got really irritated, and I was like, I would rather pay 1/5 of the price for status cake. So that's my slam of Pingdom in my talk today. Hope nobody here works for Pingdom. The thing with uptime that I want to emphasize is that the reason why we choose 3 nines is because it's essentially about as meaningful as we can get for a service that we have. Ours is not a life-critical service. It's communication for the university. When you try to get beyond 3 nines into 4 nines, 5 nines, 6 nines, you're talking about exponential increases in cost and labor. So you've really got to have, if you want to get to 5 or 6 nines, you really got to have around-the-clock monitoring, around-the-clock shifts. Your hosting provider also needs to be able to be really invested in that, and your service level agreement needs to reflect that, and the costs go up for every 9 that you want to get. Our performance metrics, again with status cake, so status cake has page speed tests. This is one that's really highly dependent on the configuration of the site itself. Aaron's probably pleased that I didn't put the Earth page speed test up here, because the Earth website it's very media rich, and so there are a lot of images, there's video, there's rich media, so the page is not going to load in an average of 1.3 seconds like you see here, but that's the trade-off that you make. Largely, me, from an infrastructure point of view, I track this just to see what our trends are over time, to see whether or not our infrastructure is keeping pace with the increasing demands on it. Again, really highly variable on what's on the website itself. Scalability and business continuity is something that we've been working really hard on over the last 12 to 18 months. This is a metric. The interesting thing with collecting metrics is that sometimes you can collect metrics that are direct representations, like the uptime checks from status cake. It's either up or down, and that's, when it checks that it's down and it registers that it's down for 5 minutes, that goes into your percentage for the month. Scalability and business continuity, I don't really have a direct way to measure this, but I do know that we had our service almost completely hosted on-premise in the Stanford data center, which sits on or near a very active fault line in Northern California, which is not exactly the most geodiverse or stable. So one of our main goals over the last 18 months was to move from on-premise hosting to cloud hosting. So this is a thing that we tracked. This was May of 2018, we had 1.5% of our sites were in the cloud, and then by April 2019, we had 100% of our sites were in the cloud. So as a proxy, we're saying we're improving our scalability and our business continuity by moving sites from an on-premise hosting service to the cloud, which, as everyone knows, is just someone else's computer. Reach. We're concerned with how many people were able to help at the university. And so we've got a service that provides websites for individuals. We've got a service that provides websites for groups and departments. So we track these numbers. Number of personal sites, how much it's increased over the previous month, and same for group and department sites. This type of data is really helpful when we're trying to do forecast and projections for our growth. We are looking to transition from Drupal 7 to Drupal 8, and knowing that we essentially and these numbers are actually pretty representative of the 3.3% or 2.6% growth per month. Knowing that those are our basic numbers, how much we increase every month, you can extrapolate that over 12, 24, 36 months and say, hey, this is how much we're going to grow. And as we try to trim down our Drupal 7 install and build up our Drupal 8 install, we know that we're going to have some organic growth that goes along with that. It's also helpful for lifecycle management because not all of the sites that are created, if you're growing at 3% a month, not all the sites that were created 12 or 24 months ago necessarily still need to be there. So you want to be able to do some outreach and have an idea of how many sites you might be able to trim. Accessibility is a tough one. This could be an entire session on its own. In fact, it was at DrupalCon in Seattle. We use a tool called Accessibility Management Platform from Level Access. That's something that the university has decided to invest in. We run a few automated tests. I will confess that I'm not entirely, let's just say I'm not entirely convinced that I'm not pleased with how well we've executed on this particular metric. So it's an area for improvement for us, just making sure that we can continue to improve this. But as we get resources and as we're able to focus a little bit more on it, we've got the historical metrics, so I track it. It was 84% last quarter, it was 84% this quarter. Let's put some more effort into it. Okay, we're up to 87%. Things like that. Are there any questions so far as I've gone through these? We've got a question in the back and then a question in the middle.
I'm wondering if this particular metric program, have you looked at other ones besides this? What led your choice of this program rather than Site Improve?
Correct. Right. Great question. So the question for the people on Zoom for the recording is, why did you choose Level Access AMP over other alternatives, Site Improve? We have used Site Improve in the past. The university has an online accessibility program that does these assessments of the different tools, and this is the one that they did a survey and an assessment a few years ago, and this is the one that they settled on. And we work closely with that program, and we did help inform that choice, and this is the one that program settled on. I'm not as heavily involved in accessibility as I have been in years past, so I'm not 100% on all of the details, but that's the short answer that I can give you. And then you had a question.
Yeah, you mentioned the number of sites.
The question is, how many sites do you host? We have over 2,000.
And you have a team of around 7. Tell me a little bit more about what those.
Sure. The question is, you have a team of about 17 people. What do those people do? So we have let me think. We've got approximately 5 developers, 2 site builders, 3 or 4 user experience people. Somebody's going to be really upset at me as I leave them out. We've got a customer experience specialist who handles the front end questions.
I didn't hear part of that. You said 2. 5 developers.
5 developers, 2 site builders, 4 or 5 user experience people, manager of user experience and design, our director. Have I gotten to 17 yet? Yes, project managers. Those are the people that are going to be upset about me that I forgot about them. Yes, we have a number of project managers as well. John.
So these metrics that you're collecting at 2,000 sites, so are you looking at the accessibility on all of them, or are you just looking at kind of 1 or 2 sites that are representative of the rest? Same question throughout our entire presentation.
Great question. So Sean's question was, do you have 2,000 sites? Are you looking at accessibility and uptime and page speed across all of these sites? We're not. And I would like to do so. And so the metrics collecting, I started as a professional development goal almost 2 years ago. So I've been doing it for about 2 years. And that's the real crux, is how do you separate the signal from noise? How do you get a high signal to noise ratio? And one of the things that we do is, so for accessibility, like I said, I feel like I'm further behind in accessibility than any of the other areas right now. So accessibility, we're just testing. We're looking at I think one site that's being tested. It's a high value site. It's a high visibility site. Some of the other ones, the page speed in particular, we have a suite of a manually curated list of approximately, let's say, between 15 and 20 high visibility websites that we monitor more closely, that are essentially, that they are harbingers of the health of the service. Remember, I'm responsible for the health of the service. That if something goes awry with one of those, and so they're things that they're sites that would cause negative impact to the university if something were to happen to them. So we have a set of, I don't know how much into detail I can go about this, but we have a set of subjective criteria by which we choose them. And so that's really the ones that we monitor in more detail. And they essentially, because well, let's just say if my personal website goes offline, nobody cares. It's not going to matter if it goes offline for 12 hours. If the Title IX website goes offline, that's kind of a problem for the university, legally and ethically. So all are equal. Some are a little bit more equal than others. So it's a great question. It's where you start to draw the lines between just collecting data to collect data and then actually turning that data into information. Other questions for now, Aaron?
So there's some things that, like accessibility is for everyone. The score is because of the content, not because of the software. So there's no way for you to directly impact the content. You could start doing training and things like that. How do you account for that? Is it just a signal and an opportunity to reach out to the content editors?
So the question was things like accessibility. It's so much dependent on the content and how it's delivered, and it has nothing to do with the infrastructure. I'm paraphrasing to make it sound better for me. I agree. The accessibility one is a tough one for me to wrap my head around. So the ones like the page speed, the ones that are more dependent on what the content is, how much can I as an infrastructure provider do to really influence that and move it? I think in my mind, it's helpful at this point just to collect the metrics and just so we have a baseline and some historical data to say, hey, this is where we've been for the last 12 months, the last 18 months. So the ones that I don't, because I'm not a front end guy, so and I'm not doing the content on this. Does it say what site it is? Yeah, doesn't say that. Doesn't say what site it is. Yeah, so I don't do the content on this website. I don't even do any of the front end development. So I literally have zero control. I can't move the needle on this one. I could if I wanted to throw something heavy at some people who actually could do the things. But yeah, it's a great question. It's just, I'm refining my methodology as I go along, and it's been one of the really fascinating things to learn, like which things do I really have agency on and which metrics don't I, and what business objectives do they tie to? Another question back here.
Kind of related to what you were talking about, how do you share this information to content or so that say I'm a content developer and I notice this and figure, oh, well, I could do something with this. Is there a process?
Right, so the question was, how do you share this type of information with the people who do have agency to change these numbers? And my answer on this one in particular, in accessibility, I don't have that. I haven't been doing that feedback loop, but that feedback loop, it exists in other parts of the team and in terms of project-based, in terms of the projects that people are working on with the clients and with the content creators. So I look at it as kind of an overlapping Venn diagram, like the user experience, our user experience wing of our team doesn't really have much agency on the, let's say, stability or the uptime of our platform, but it affects their relationships with clients. And so if they're able to have some information, if they're able to have some data on that, and they can say, hey, you know, this is a problem, and I'm able to fix that, then I can say, yeah, if I am running this and all of a sudden it goes from 84% to like 22%, I'm going to be like, guys, what's going on this website? Something really got funky over the last week. You just changed it to like white on white, the entire theme. So it's in terms of the constellation, the accessibility part is a little bit further out of where I have agency in terms of infrastructure, but it's still good for me to keep an eye on where things are.
You mentioned that you moved your site to the cloud.
Okay, so the question was, you mentioned that you moved your sites to the cloud. What are the details on that? So we had approximately 2,400 websites on a internally hosted on-premise environment, and we moved a large majority of them to Acquia Cloud Site Factory over the past 18 months. Acquia Cloud Site Factory, yes. So we have approximately, we also did some culling and some weeding of the garden as part of that. So a number of those sites that were unused or underutilized just got retired as part of that process, but we now have approximately 2,000 sites on Acquia Cloud Site Factory, and then we have a number of sites in various Acquia Cloud Enterprise and Acquia Cloud Professional environments. And then we also have a hosting environment that is internally built, Stanford built, but is hosted on Amazon Web Services. But we're taking and we're consolidating that. That was part of a pilot program 4 or 5 years ago. We're taking and consolidating those sites and moving them onto Acquia as well.
And how does that work? Are you happy with that?
The question is, how does that work out? Are you happy with Acquia? I would love to talk to you when I'm not being recorded. Are there any specific areas where we would love to see improvements? Oh, in the hosting that we're using right now? Yes, everyone. I think that's what that's what the whole point of this is that we collect these metrics because we want to see, we want to know where we are, and we want to know what our targets are. I would love to have 4 nines. I would love to have page speed loads that are under 1 second. I would love to have 100% on the accessibility scores. I would love for every single one of these metrics. I would love to have, 45-second turnaround times on addressing Drupal highly critical security vulnerabilities. So I would love for all of these metrics to be driven further. I would love for my boss to put another 0 on my check, and she keeps promising to, but it's the wrong side of the decimal point. So, but I collect these metrics so that I can have ammo so she can do that.
It's actually a very great platform service. If I buy something from them, I would say they err on the side of overkill. But it's expensive, that's all. Expect for them to, take the quote and give them and add another EC2, make sure that you've got uptime, plan for 2 million visitors a month of traffic, even when you don't, that's the kind of thing. And if you say, oh, we just have this little site, the site developers, you might as well just go to Bluehost or something, because they're not going to give you this, they're not going to deal with that. They're going to give you an enterprise solution, and you're going to pay for it.
Not necessarily the right size.
So that's what it's, so you have and it fits perfectly because Stanford has so many sites and they need something like this.
We are enterprise, yeah.
You need something like this. So you have 1,000 sites, or you're Sony, or you're Stanford, then it makes sense. Yeah, so that might make sense for you.
And that's really where, what I'm trying to get at here is that I'll move on to the takeaways here, that I don't care if you're managing 2,000 sites or a dozen sites, you want to right size this process for yourself. You want to determine what are your business objectives and what metrics do you care about tracking. You want to collect them and you want to automate as much as possible. And this is where we get to the audience participation part, is what are you tracking and how many sites are you monitoring and supporting, and what are you tracking and why? But for your 12 sites, what are you tracking and how often? And
We have about 1,000 sites.
oh, 1,000.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Okay.
And, I've been in the job for 2.5 months, and I wish I could answer your question. I don't really know.
Fair point.
I actually, he has mine. I did his stuff before. Yeah.
Maybe she knows.
Yeah, we didn't track much. I mean, mostly we used Google Analytics, for those sites that it set it up for them. But, with the resource of being 1% of 1,000 sites.
Yeah. We would, that's another great point. We would like to, I have heard of people using Google Analytics, kind of split Google Analytics, where they've got a central Google Analytics for every site that's on their service so they can collect everything. Isn't that what you're doing? Yeah, so that's what Sean's doing with UC Davis, and then individual sites can have their own Google Analytics. That's one blind spot that we have. We're not doing that yet.
So we're tracking a lot of the same stuff that you are, but not in a consolidated way where we can make any real sense out of the data. It's more like I can bring up, I use, what's it called? Well, New Relic as a pinging service, so I can syntax it. I can look it up and say like, hey, it looks like good for a while, but I'm not collecting the data, putting it in a spreadsheet, running reports on it. You know, that's, I love to do.
Yeah, and that's what we were doing. You know, anytime that Sarah would, why did you go? I want you to go over there. So that was kind of what we were doing, is that every time, if we wanted on-demand stats, I could give you on-demand stats, like how many sites do we have? What's our uptime for the last month? But I wasn't doing anything in any sort of systematized way, and this is an outgrowth of something that was a professional development goal, which was, hey, let's track these every month. And so that we have them at our fingertips, so that Sarah doesn't have to ask me, so that our CIO doesn't have to ask me, so that, you know, whenever anybody needs this is here. And now it's a janky Google spreadsheet that I manually input most of the data. I've got a little bit of automated, but I would love to have this a little bit more automated and then be able to run analytics on it and track it with Tableau or some service like that. But I guess what I'm trying to say is make the baby steps, you know, go from, if you're not tracking anything, start tracking things. If you're not tracking anything regularly, put time on your calendar every month that's like, hey, track this, and grow it from there and see where you get the benefit. Because if you're spending time on it, there's a funny, of course I'm wearing an XKCD t-shirt, but there's a funny XKCD comic that's essentially a chart of how long something takes me versus how much time it would take me to automate it versus how much time I would save over the lifetime of doing it. And running these essentially takes me about an hour every month, and I ran the numbers to determine how long it would take me to automate all of this. And I'm better off just manually running the numbers every month until I'm probably 75 or something like that, which I look 75, but I'm not there yet.
So more things that I'm interested in tracking are functionality. I don't know if you know how to do the functionality of the platform itself. So things like, okay, we added this, we added a new module. Is anybody actually using it? We turn this on for 2 people, and
right.
We're spending all this effort maintaining this functionality, and nobody's using it.
Yeah, that's a great one in terms of tracking functionality and usage of things that you add to your platform. So Shay had run some numbers about a year ago of our existing Drupal 7 infrastructure and found that the median number of content types was 4. and the median number of users was like 3, and the median number of nodes was like 17 or something. I'm sure I'm off on those numbers, but I'm not off by an order of magnitude. So yeah, you know, are you spending 3 weeks to add some functionality that some vocal stakeholder has asked for and that they're the only ones using it? So that's, again, a great one. Irina.
Any metrics, could you get them on regular update regularly? Because if you have a platform.
I didn't hear that.
Is it possible to get any of these metrics directly? Like if Upweb would say, we'd like to build these metrics into our platform, is it technically possible, or are they very standard specific?
So the question is, are any of these available from your hosting provider, or could be available? You might see that a couple of these rows are hidden. Some of these rows are the ones that come directly from our hosting provider, and they're ones that I don't want to show because they impact our contract with our hosting provider, and we're in contract negotiations right now. So yes, some of them do come from our hosting provider, but some of the other ones, yeah, we would love for it would be great for our hosting provider to provide us all of these and just say, here's your report, and here it is in a, you know, here it is in a JSON that you can flexibly manipulate and report on and things like that. But that would probably put me out of a job, and I'd have to go find something else to do.
And so like if a stakeholder requests a feature, like one of the things they wanted on some of the landing pages is they wanted to test some people that required it, so required getting on that field and that thing so that we can pull that in. Well, then we can track and Google Analytics, and we're also the GTM now. And because some of our sites also have e-commerce, so we're working with a company called Adline, GTM, they work with us with Google Analytics, GTM, and Marketo, so that we get that data. Is anyone clicking on this? Is anyone using it? So you don't really know, okay, this monitor is being used, but if there's a feature that your stakeholders request, you can kind of look at it like that.
Tracking IAP solution.
Yeah.
All right, guess we didn't have any chat from the Zoom people. Thanks for being here, Zoomies. Hi, Marco. Oh, where did that go? That's all. Hold on. Hold on. I got the best. Is it going to show up? There we go. We did audience participation. And now the big reveal. You ready? That's it. Thank you for all the great questions, and I'm happy to talk about this at length.